Hello fellow miniature painters, I'm Kuro Cleanbrush and today I would like to teach you how to paint non-metallic metal or NMM steel swords. Alright, hello everyone. So, before we get started here, as usual, we're going to go over color selection and how exactly we want to approach this. As you can see here, I have my standard Reaper Master Series paints in front of me, and I'm going to focus most of this non-metallic metal on Stormy Gray, Cloudy Gray, and Misty Gray. They're kind of Reaper's neutral gray triad. But to add some liveliness to the steel color, to the non-metallic metal, I want to work a little bit of brown liner into the shadows to make the shadows really dark. And I want to work a little bit of blue into the higher colors to just give that little bit of sky reflection. We're not doing sky earth non-metallic metal, but you still want to have a little bit of reflected color from your ground and your sky if you can. And then we're going to finish with pure white on the very high end of this scale. One of the secrets to painting good non-metallic metal is that no matter what, you have to go from as dark as you can to as light as you can to really get that reflected light look that you want. Now, unfortunately, I can show you a picture of my palette, but you're probably not going to glean too much useful information from it. All I want to really convey with this is mix however you have to mix to go through your whole gray triad and get down to your darkest, near black or black, and then mix up all the way to your white. Non-metallic metal is more almost a blending technique than anything else. So the smoother you make your blends, the happier a camper you will be and the better your non-metallic metal will look. And therefore, it behooves you to make sure that when you're mixing your paint, make the transition between the colors as minimal as possible. I tried to work a little bit of blue into the higher side of things. Not sure it really showed up as much as I wanted to, but we can always add that back later with a glaze or, well, let's just see how things turn out. The way we want to approach this is I've got my sword, and I've base coated the sword in cloudy gray just to save us some time. And now I always like to block out my highest highlights and my darkest shadows to give me some idea for where I want to start putting things. Just because I can reach it best, I'm going to arbitrarily decide that the light source comes from over here. That makes this face of the sword the one that's going to be directly reflecting the light from the light source. That will make this the darkest part of the sword. Conversely, if this part of the sword is in a very high highlight region, that means it will shade this part of the sword because we've got kind of a diamond cross section to our blade and it's got a spine. So this part of the sword will be shaded on the underside, and then we'll put a little bit of reflected highlight from the ground on this back left portion. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of my white on my brush here. I'm going to wipe it off like normal, and then I'm going to start putting it on. And try not to obscure things as I do. I'm going to cover the tip of the sword up here, trying my best to stop at the spine of the sword. And then, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to adjust my setup. Okay, trying again. Alright, I'm going to take white, wipe off the excess on my thumb as usual, and I'm really gonna draw out the tip of the sword here. I'm gonna leave it with kind of a jagged diagonal edge. The edge of the color here on this far back region should be directly perpendicular to the light rays. Then we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the underside of the sword. All right, Now I'm going to go, and for my own edification and just to help me visualize things, I'm going to take my brown liner and I'm going to put that in opposite of what I just created. So we're going to go ahead and do the tip of the bottom of the sword. And then the top back of the sword. Trying to make sure you can see here as best as I can. I let my diagonal shape get away from me a little bit, but we'll refine that with some of the other colors. Okay, now that I've got my highest highlight and my deepest shadow blocked in, I'm going to go ahead and start blending towards the midtone. So I'm going to take my ghost white and I'm going to extend the edge of the highlight a little bit, draw it out with whatever blending technique you want to use. I layer and feather. If you want to wet blend, that's perfectly acceptable. Doesn't matter as long as you can get a smooth color transition. It might require 2 coats. I'm going to go back and get the underside of the blade, and then I will try to work on the top of the blade as well. Once again, trying to help out the camera. Just filling in that little region that didn't get fully coated the first time around. And now I've probably extended my highest highlights a little bit too far, so we'll try to eat into them with the lower colors. Now I'm going to use a mix of misty gray with the ghost white that has a little bit of blue in it, and start trimming things up here. I can see that I really needed a second coat of the ghost white, so we'll go back and add that. With non-metallic metal, I find it really helpful just to start blocking things out. Just get some paint on the miniature, on whatever portion of the miniature you want to paint, and then really go back through and touch it up, fix the transitions. It's really a very trial and error process. So, in other words, don't be too put out if you have some difficulty with your first few layers, or you're like, oh, it's supposed to look better, it doesn't, why not? Just go back through, keep tweaking it, keep making it better and better and better. And I'm going to move down a little bit lower in color. I believe this is some of my cloudy gray with a little bit of misty gray and a little bit of the aquamarine. I added the red background here in an attempt to make my camera keep the colors truer. I'm not sure that it's succeeding, but hopefully it's not too hard on the eyes as I'm filming this. Okay. It's coming along. I'm going to be really rough here. Doesn't have to be perfect yet. Alright, I'm going to add back in the mid-tone. And then we'll rough out the dark parts. So I lost a lot of the transition there on the dark part of the blade, but we've got a little bit of a transition going on the top of the blade here. Let's start working our way from the darkest colors backlight. So I'm going to take mixed brown liner and cloudy gray and start working on things. Once again, try not to totally obscure what I'm doing here. Pull things out. Lengthen those shadows. Oops, I'm sliding off to the side. My apologies. Okay, lengthening shadows. Now I'm going to go with a little bit more gray in the mix. A little bit less brown liner. Try to keep the transition between the two halves of the blade as crisp as possible. We can go through and fix that a little bit later. That little bit of white you're seeing underneath the blade is actually not the edge of the blade right here. That's actually the sticky tack that I have holding this to the sword. So I didn't miss a spot, even though it looks like it. It fooled me for a few seconds. Coming along. All right. Now I'm going to go with pure stormy gray. I'm purposely going back and eating up some of the other colors I put on there. Eating back into the shadow, trying to use some of it up. And then I'll start transitioning more towards the middle cloudy gray here. Once you have that really dark light contrast, it will start to bring the sword to light. As you can see though, we still have probably a lot too much shadow down here, and then on the other side, meanwhile on the other side we didn't blend the highlight well enough. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my middle tone back in and try to fix some things there. You never want to fully lose the mid-tone whenever you're doing any of this stuff. And I'm going to try to gently work that back in. Flip it around. Gently work it back in. So we have a decent start on a non-metallic metal sword. Now I should try to move it around here so that it's not glinting too bad. This part is definitely weak, definitely needs to be fixed up. So I'm going to go ahead and go off camera and try to all I'm going to do is going to smooth my blends here for a little bit and show you how just smoothing the blends, in addition to extending this a little bit, will bring your NMM to life. So I'll see you in just a second. Okay. So I went and smoothed all my blends. Not to the nth degree. I could obviously smooth them a whole lot better, and the more time you spend smoothing those blends, the better everything will turn out. So feel free to smooth and smooth and smooth as long as you possibly can, and as long as you want to. to produce the result that you want. Hopefully though now you can start to see the general effect. Once you have this all done, you get to add the glint on the edges of the blade. So to do that, I'm going to grab my white again, my highest white, and I'm going to side brush the edges of the sword, especially the upper edge. So I'm going to try to get this on camera where you can see. I'm going to take the edge of my brush and keeping it perpendicular to the edge of the sword, draw it down to the edge of the blade. Now, in the interest of helping you guys to see, I had a bit too much of an angle, but you can still see, hey, that helps out a lot. Or rather, you could if my camera would focus. There we go. Now, we can do the same thing with the bottom of the blade, but I don't want to go quite as high because that won't have quite as nice of a reflection, seeing as we're saying that that's opposite to our light source. So I'm going to take Ghost White. And once again, I'm going to wipe most of it off on my thumb. And I'm going to get everything held just right. And I'm going to start side brushing again. Go all the way to the tip. Okay, now the sword looks just that much shinier. Once you've gotten the edges all nice and glinty, you can, if you want to, and you're brave, go ahead and get the spine of the blade the exact same way. Now, be advised, this tends to be a little bit tricky because the spine of the blade, unfortunately, is usually not quite distinct enough unless you have a very, very well sculpted sword or you spent a lot of time prepping it and making sure that the spine of the blade was just right for you to side brush this. So you're probably going to have to very carefully draw your brush down the spine of the blade, which means that you'll probably mess up a little bit, which means that you'll probably have to go back in and correct your colors. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do that because it takes a little while and a lot of cleanup, but I will show you an example of what this all looks like if you do everything the way I'm describing it. So this is a miniature I painted a few months ago, and as you can see, using essentially these exact same techniques, I decided the light was coming from up here, right? And highlighted that accordingly, and then started filling in the shadows. There's a little bit of dusky purple mixed in to this. Not sure if you can see it well with this backdrop. And we use the same techniques we were talking about. On these swords, I did define the spine of the blade. I feel that it worked really well for them. And the trick, just go from dark to light and really, really, really feather, wet blend, two brush blend, whatever you have to do to get all the transitions as smooth as possible, and you will sell your effect. So that's all for this time. I hope this was somewhat useful to you. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.